Hello and welcome to the August 2017 release webinar for the 901 enhancements. In this release, we're continuing to streamline and improve the functionality in the 901 application. A number of these enhancements were previewed at the recent workshops, and I'm going to take you through all of the changes. One of the big things I'm pleased to tell you is that now all columns in the 901 results grid automatically update each time you open the application or the user carries out a right-click refresh grid. So that's sort name, IRD number, postal address, partner, manager, responsibility, department, family group, and return status. And return status has been a key one. I'm going to demonstrate that updating in just a minute. So this means that records no longer need to be deleted to display up-to-date information. So here I am in the 901 application. You'll see the second record down, company 1225. We come across, it's got a return status of inactive. So if I go to that particular return, I've just added some interest in here, so I'll just save it and close it. And then if I look at the workflow now, we'll see it's moved to work in progress. So if I go back to the 901 application, so it's still showing inactive here, I'll just refresh the grid. And it's updated the status to work in progress. The second enhancement is an audit trail, which is now available to keep a record of actions taken against an individual record. Access to this functionality is enabled by a Joe admin rights. So if you see, there's a number of things happen here. It's got some that have had processing taking place, some that have been posted, one that's been completed, etc. So if I right click on the record and view the audit trail, I've only got a couple of options there because this record's been completed. So it shows me the date and time, what the action was, so approved, and who actually approved it, who the user was. So that's the same for processed and completed. If I look at some of the other records, that shows me then who approved, who processed, who posted on there. So the idea of the audit trail was to take away some of the concerns for people that were doing approving of records. So they'd say, well, I actually did the approval, but then it got unapproved. I don't know who unapproved it, or how do I know who processed or posted it? So the audit trail now captures all that information for us. The notes section has been enhanced to display whether a note is active or inactive. An active note shows in green, and inactive remains in blue. This allows a user easy identification of a note requiring action. Once the action has been carried out, the user can change the status to inactive. So I'll just quickly put a couple of notes in here. So I'll call this test 1. And when I tick it on there, it obviously got what it was, so it's what the note was, who was added by, what date it was added, and it's got this active setting as well. So I'll put the tick on here and close this. And I now get the notes icon showing in green to show that it's an active note. If I put another one on here, I'll just make this test 2. So it could be that this is just a note going onto the system. It doesn't need any action taking place, so I can make that inactive. And I do that by taking the active tick off. And when I close that one, you'll see the inactive one is showing in blue and the active is showing in green. So once the active one's been dealt with, I can come in here and mark that as inactive if required. So one of the problems were that people were saying notes were being put on by different people in the system and they weren't sure whether it was a note for an action or a note on top of another note. And this just shows you now the user can choose to say whether it's an active note or inactive. And you can filter by active and inactive in the list here as well. So you can get a good view of exactly what's there to be dealt with. Red text highlights have been added to the selection box title if a filter is applied to this particular selection. So the column headings will turn red if there's any filters applied to those. This is a good way of when you're actually running your list to see if there's any filters on the main selections already in place. We've introduced the ability to reprocess emails and letters in bulk. So previously you could only do them on an individual record basis. If I take these 3 here that have actually been processed and I highlight those lists in there and I right click, I get the option to reprocess the email letter. I'm actually just going to select and approve a couple of records here. I'm going to move up to the processing section and the letter creation. So although these are set to email, you'll see the default print settings at the bottom show that default is picked as PDF print. Previously it was always direct print, so this is a choice that the practice makes in the system and user settings. So just to show these briefly, under correspondence NZ tax, the bottom area here says default IR901 print process. So I've got it set to 1, which is PDF print. If you left it at 0, which is a default, that is direct print. A request we had was to add a date created column to the results grid. So one of the issues that we had, I'll just go to selection column at the top here, selection ribbon. So obviously you would run your list at a particular stage of the month, and then running new list a couple of weeks later, the idea of that is that the system goes away and says, are there any new clients that have been added to the practice that require a 901 letter since the list was initially drawn? And the message will come back and say 5 new clients have been added. But there's no way of telling who those 5 clients were or where they sat in the list. So we've added date created, and it's not going to work too well on this demonstration because everything's created on the same day. But if you imagine if you ran a list and it brought 5 new clients in, we've got this date created field here that can be dragged into the results grid, and then you can order that to show what date the record was actually created, and you'll be then able to filter out which of the clients are new. Another request was for the RIT column to be added as well, so you can see on what RIT value the provisional calculations have been made. Another column added, which you'll see, which comes at the end of the row here, is the Inc. total payable. So the idea of this is you'll see they've got a record here where there's 1,047 provisional, got student loan of 807, giving a total Inc. payable of 1854. So this field is also available to bring on as a merge field into the email body template. So it's easy then to tell clients exactly what their overall figure is that they need to pay. So finally, and this is more for information, to let you know that clients with a termination date, how that's set in Client Console, are excluded from the list selection. So the majority of these enhancements are as a direct result of client feedback. And so if you have any suggestions for further enhancements, then please log them with the support team as usual, or direct with myself or Nigel Babington. So thank you for taking the time to watch the webinar. Just a reminder, there's also a brief new enhancements webinar covering all aspects of the August 2017 release, and then there's an in-depth compliance admin because there's been a lot of new changes in there. So please take the time to have a view of those as well. Thank you very much.